Hitting live because we need to start.
Yep. Testing.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us and all that good stuff. Dan isn't muted. I'm not muted. Good start.
Dan has 100 gigabytes of free hard drive space
Yeah.
this week.
Yeah. So I've always liked the idea of like one of those laptops, like workstation laptops that just acts as your desktop and you just hook it up to a monitor. But every time I tried it with the Laptop Studio One. Every time I try it, I always get annoyed by cables. I just don't like having a cable running on the desk to the laptop.
Yeah, I mean broadcasting, being a podcaster,
Yeah, it's a
like you just have to
nightmare.
have like more all these like
Yeah,
you're like I can't use a laptop webcam.
exactly. Yeah.
I can't use a laptop microphone. I can't use laptop speakers, so it's like all of a sudden you just increased everything,
Yeah, and also I
Yeah.
tried it with the Surface Dock too, which was fine, but it would sometimes not pass through things correctly, and then you'd have to unplug it, replug it, and then also when the laptop's closed, you can't turn the thing on. It's so annoying. It's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll just get an all-in
Yeah,
one.
right.
Anyway, we should
Yeah, it
start whenever you're ready.
must be nice to have an easy job where you don't need to.
Yeah, right.
All right, I'm now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 333 for November 17th, 2023. A lot of threes today. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast with myself, Daniel Rubino, and Zach Bowden. We'll be talking a lot this week about, Copilot is coming to Windows 10, which is interesting because Windows 10 was feature locked a long time ago, and there's no more development with it. It was just getting support. But that apparently has changed, so we'll walk through that strategy and how you can get it and when it's coming to everybody else. Speaking of Microsoft, also with Windows 11, if you're in Europe, good news for you. Microsoft has agreed to comply with the DMA over there, which has to do with privacy and everything, which means big changes to those of you who do not like the default stuff in Windows 11, including the browser and MSN and all the other stuff, which we'll go through what that means. And also bring up the question, will this trickle down to the US market? Should also point out that because of the same requirements, I believe it's the same requirements, Apple has agreed now to use RCS messaging. Wow, who would have thunk? We'll also go through Microsoft Ignite, which happened this week. And it turns out there was a lot of news that came out of there that is of interest, especially around AI and Copilot and all that. I have to admit, we saw a lot of traffic this week from some of these stories, signaling a lot of high interest in this stuff. So we'll go through those stories too and what they mean. Specifically, I believe the Windows app will be a hot topic and what that is. It's actually exactly what it sounds like. And finally, kind of breaking news that just happened. OnePlus has just made a deal with Microsoft to get that full-on phone link juice, the same one that Samsung has been getting for a long time. So this just sweetened the deal a little bit if you've been considering the OnePlus Open, aka their folding phone, which I've been on the fence. I don't need it. I really do like my Samsung. But I did get to play with that phone, and it is a really nice phone.
You'll
It's
like the
well,
OnePlus way more than the Samsung. You will.
yeah. My big beef with the Samsung. Well, I'll say this for later, but just quickly, just the cameras aren't
Yeah.
great. And from what I understand, the OnePlus cameras are better. By how much I don't know, but anything is better than that. Anyway, that's that. Zach, how are you doing on this podcast? I'm sorry, on this fine Friday.
I'm not
I
too
can't talk
bad.
yet today.
It's been a busy week for me. Obviously, we were sort of organizing the Microsoft Ignite stuff. Nobody will understand how nightmarish it is handling a Microsoft Ignite embargo until you've done it, because there's so much stuff that they actually just give press something called the Book of News. They do publish that, so you can actually take a look at the stuff we have to look at ahead of time. But every year when we're gearing up for this event, it's like, okay, we're going to have literally hundreds and hundreds of announcements. We need to triage it. We need to look through what's important, what isn't important, because believe it or not, some of it isn't important, and pick out the stuff that our audience will be most interested in. In this case, Windows Central, more consumery stuff, which is a bit of a stretch when it comes to Microsoft Ignite, but it does have, and there is some stuff in there that is interesting to the wider audience, I guess.
And there's also stuff that they do, which is a little sneaky, which is sometimes they put in news that's not really news.
Yeah,
it's not new news. It's stuff they've announced previously, and they just kind of snuck it in there. It's like,
I've been caught out a few times.
Make sure.
Yeah, sometimes they'll announce something at Build, and then they'll re-announce it at Ignite as if it's a new thing. They won't say it was announced earlier this year. They'll just be like, new, this, that, and the other. And it's like, oh, but you talked about this 6 months ago. So we have to be careful of that as well. But we have our team now that works on it, and this year we were a well-oiled machine. We got through it. I triaged everything, sent out what I needed to send out, covered what we covered, and I think it paid off for us. I think this week we did very well in regards to Ignite coverage, and I'm very proud of the team.
Yeah, no, it was even I was impressed.
That's impressive.
But yeah, we have some great news writers on the site right now. Specifically Colton and Kevin have been doing a really bang up job, and of course Sean was there too. But yeah, the coverage was great. So well, we'll get to that in a minute, I suppose. Well, I mean, I guess one of the big announcements that kind of came out alongside Ignite was this story you broke, as from your own reporting, that Microsoft is going to bring Copilot to Windows 10, and we talked about it, I believe, last week, and what that means. And Microsoft officially announced it this week, but it's not perfectly clear either in terms of it's not like you can get it right now, but you kind of can, right? So explain how that works.
Yeah, so this week Microsoft came out and officially confirmed that they are going to backport Copilot from Windows 11 to Windows 10. Alongside that news, they also sort of announced that they would be looking at additional investments on Windows 10. And there's quite a few layers to this announcement. We'll start with the Copilot stuff. The Copilot stuff simply being, yep, Copilot's coming to Windows 10. The experience will more or less be the same across Windows 10 and Windows 11. It won't be feature parity. There will be some things that Windows 11 can do that Windows 10 can't. That's to be expected. I think that will mainly evolve around plugins. Some plugins might call to specific Windows 11 APIs that just don't exist on Windows 10. In that case, of course, those functions won't be available on Windows 10. But at the very basic level, things like Bing Chat, being able to use it to write prompts and haikus and find out information, compare data, this, that, and the other, will be a thing. Developers will also be able to build plugins that are cross-compatible across Windows 10 and Windows 11. So plugins will be supported on Windows 10. It's just that maybe some specific ones that are Windows 11 specific won't, of course, work on Windows 10. And I guess technically that could work the other way. There may be some things that for Windows 10 that don't work on Windows 11. I doubt it, though. When Microsoft announced this, we sort of talked about this last week, but the reason they're doing it essentially is because there's more users on Windows 10 and Microsoft wants Copilot in front of as many users as possible. They didn't outright state that. They actually sort of positioned it as, we want to bring value to Windows 10 customers. We want to give them the best of Microsoft. And to do that, we need to backport some stuff. But the reality is they need more users on Copilot. And so putting it in front of the 1 billion Windows 10 devices out there, that gives them a much larger market to attack, if you will. There are some caveats to this. So the Copilot is only going to roll out on Windows 10 Home and Pro for now. Enterprise and Education editions are left out of this. They didn't say that would be the case forever. They're just saying for now. So this initial rollout is just Home and Pro only, and within that, it's only unmanaged devices. So if you're using Windows 10 Pro on a managed PC by your work or school, for example, you most likely won't see Copilot yet either. And the other thing is that it actually requires higher system requirements on Windows 10 than the base system requirements that the actual OS needs. So I think Windows 10 requires 2 gigs of RAM and I think less than 720p display to actually run. But Copilot itself, if it's going to appear on your desktop, you need to be running with at least 4 gigs of RAM and at minimum 720p display. So I think that's most PCs these days. That said, Windows 10, of course, did carry over a lot of old Windows 7 and Windows 8 PCs, which would have certainly shipped with 2 gigs of RAM. And I would be shocked if any PCs shipped with a less than 720p display in 2011 onward. But hey, who knows? Maybe it happened. But those PCs won't see Copilot. But anything relatively newer than that will see it at some point. And some point is a key word here, because although they announced it this week, It's not actually rolling out yet. They announced a preview build, but it's not in the preview build. It's coming in a newer preview build sometime soon. This has been a weird announcement because when they briefed press earlier this week about this, they were under the impression that it would be shipping in preview this Thursday in the Insider program, and then they last minute changed plan. Like, actually, by the way, it's not going to be in the build this week. It's coming at some point soon. They do say it will probably roll out early next year, I believe. So I don't know. It will be coming at some point in the near future, and I think insiders will get it first in the coming weeks before the end of the year. So that's kind of cool.
I do like how it has the newer design. You know, we talked about that last week, where they put the icon in the
right. Yeah.
What do you call it? The taskbar.
Yeah.
What's that section called?
The system tray. Yeah, so what they're doing with Windows 10 is the Copilot button will be in the very far right of the taskbar instead of being next to the start button and stuff like it is on Windows 11, currently at least. On Windows 10, it will be next to the Action Center button. In fact, I think it's pushing over the Action Center button.
Yes.
So users who are familiar with that button placement are going to have to sort of relearn where that moves. It's only moving a few pixels to the left, but that's going to probably annoy some people. But yeah, it's being buried into the system tray. It's quite interesting because obviously Windows 10's design language is very monochrome, very white and black. And the Copilot icon is like this 3D colorful icon. It's very out of place on the Windows 10
but
taskbar.
like, you know, we talked about that last week with the idea here that it's going to balance out the widgets icon, at least on Windows 11.
Yeah, Windows 11, that makes sense.
Kind of
Windows 10 doesn't have that. It has actually, believe it or not, so this is the second layer to this announcement. They did announce additional investments to Windows 10. They basically said that they're revisiting their approach to updating Windows 10. Obviously, that's referring to the decision they made under Panos Panay's leadership, in which they essentially washed their hands of Windows 11. They would say, this is the last Windows 10 feature update, version 22H2. We're not going to update it any further. Panos Panay's now gone, and suddenly Microsoft is interested in updating Windows 10 again. And so while they aren't saying, what they said to us that they're not going to release any more version updates to Windows 10, so version 22H2 is still the last, they are revisiting their approach to updates on Windows 10 and will invest in additional things over the next 2 years until Windows 10 exits support in October 2025. That date is not moving, at least for now. They were very firm that October 14th, 2025 is the day Windows 10 leaves support. I think that will still change, especially if market share doesn't decline in the next 2 years. But for now, at least, they're sticking to their guns on that, and so we'll have to assume that that's the case. But the additional investments also include, for now at least, minor changes to things like the news and interests flyout. In the preview build they shipped this week, they said the news and interests flyout is now larger. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming they're trying to mimic what the widgets board looks like, because the widgets board is kind of like this full screen side panel almost. Windows 10's news and interest thing is like a flyout. It just sort of pops up on the taskbar, and it's a small box on a large screen. I think they're going to make it taller and make it look more like the widgets board, I guess. And then over time, more things. So things like Microsoft Paint AI may show up on Windows 10. That's not confirmed. That was just an example that they used as the kind of feature that they could look at. Not confirming that they are or aren't, but the stuff like that is what's on the cards now for Windows 10 users. But yeah, I do find it quite interesting that this decision to sort of go back and start updating Windows 10 again came about after the new Windows leadership team came about. So obviously, with Panay leaving Microsoft sort of scrambled, and they sort of essentially merged two teams internally. They merged the Windows team with the Microsoft Web Experiences team, and that's now called the Windows Web Experiences team. And that's led by Mikhail Parakin, I think his name is. He was previously in charge of the Windows Web Experiences team, and so he was in charge of things like Edge, Bing, by extension Copilot, I guess, and Microsoft News. And so it's not surprising that the first thing this new team has chosen to do is backport the biggest Microsoft web service of 2023 to the version of Windows that has the most users. Of course, they want that in front of as many people as possible. That was the first thing that team, I guess, thought of, and so they're going back and they're going to continue updating Windows 10. In addition to that, this also sort of extends into a new mindset for this new Windows team. Obviously, with Panos Panay and his vision for Windows, it was move on from Windows 10. This is Windows 11. We're going to do a Windows 12 and then a Windows 13. And, it was always moving forwards for Panos Panay. It was never looking back. This new Windows team, based on the conversations I've had with my own sources who are familiar with this team and how they seem to be operating, They're a lot more interested in how Windows 10 was updated in the Terry Myerson era, where Windows 10 essentially was continuously updated on a yearly basis or biannually basis. I guess there was 2 updates a year for at certain points in Windows 10's lifetime. But the annual sort of release cycle for new major versions of the OS under Windows 10 sort of time, the new Windows leadership team likes that approach of updating Windows. They kind of want to do an annual big update versus doing a big one every 3 years and then having smaller sort of feature drops in between. That's kind of what they were doing under Panos Panay. To my knowledge, they're stepping back from that vision and they're going to go back to doing annual feature updates for Windows going forward. And the reason for that is they don't want to fragment the user base anymore. Windows 10 and Windows 11 right now, like I said, I think it's about 30% Windows 11, 70% Windows 10. Introducing a Windows 12 into the mix makes that worse, and so the new Windows team don't want to do that. They kind of want to just keep Windows 11, and they want to get everybody off Windows 10 while also bigging up their services. Because remember, this team is also very interested in the web services side of Microsoft. And so they're essentially going to start treating Windows 10 like Windows 11 in regards to services, at least. There's no reason why a new Microsoft service shouldn't be on both. It's just unnecessarily limiting the market share that service can target. And so so anything in regards to AI, I think, especially around Copilot, will be a Windows 10 feature as well. So that's the news in regards to Windows 10. If you're a Windows 10 user, this may be good news or bad news, depending on if you like Microsoft's AI efforts. I've seen a lot of people.
Listen,
go on.
I think so. I think the issue with the AI efforts for people, it comes down to this, which is, and you have this issue kind of too, which is like, how do you use it? Like, why don't I just use search? I'm using it a lot recently. For instance, I went down this rabbit hole. So I don't listen to music. I listen to music in the car, but I work from home, so I don't drive very often.
Yeah.
I've had my car for 4.5 years. It has 26,000 miles on it, so I don't really drive very often. But what I do, I'll listen to music. But I mostly listen to music only at the gym. So I go to the gym almost every day, like 5-6 days a week. So I'm there for usually 2 hours. So I listen to music there, and I'm always, I get bored and stuff. I'm trying new stuff. And so I recently kind of was starting to get back into Simon and Garfunkel. And so they have the song called The Boxer. It's really famous. And I was just like, I was reading the lyrics. It's all folky and stuff. And I was like, I wonder what this is, what the lyrics kind of mean, where the inspiration was from. So I just asked Bing, I was like, Copilot, what do the lyrics mean for The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel? And it, like, just a few seconds, spit out a whole paragraph that not only talked about the lyrics, but talked about the inspiration behind it. And it was pulling, and mind you, that song came out in 1969, but I found like an interview in Playboy from like 1972 where Paul Simon talks about where he got some of the lyrics from. It was actually from the Bible. And it was just like, I learned so much about that song, like in its history, just from that. Now, and what was neat about it, could I have done a search? Sure. But I would have had to read and find multiple sources to get that story that was presented to me in one paragraph. Instead, Bing or Copilot, whatever you want to call it, pulled all that information in and gave me a summary paragraph that I could just read in like 15 seconds. And then I was just like, oh, cool. Okay. So it does the research for you. And I started using this more and more. I was listening to my other favorite band, the Levelers. I go with periods where I don't listen to my favorite bands for a while because I get tired of them. And so I started listening to Levelers. So I started punching in the same kind of question. What does this song mean? What does this song mean? And I started learning. And not only does it tell you kind of like what the song means, and by the way, sometimes it actually is analyzing the lyrics themselves, and the AI is interpreting what the lyrics mean, which is super cool. And sometimes it's also pulling in information from, there are like websites that discuss song lyrics. But then it also pulls in facts. Like one of my favorite songs is called Is This Art? And it's the first song I ever heard by them, and I got really into it. I didn't know the song is based on a poem by a famous British poet who also did lyrics stuff. He wrote the poem, and then the Levelers either got access to it or something like that, and they just wrote the entire song around that poem. And I was just like, I've been listening to that song for like 20 years. I had no idea that was like the story behind it, So when it comes to stuff like that, or stuff like when your dog eats some THC laced materials and gets stoned out of his mind, and you start typing in kind of these questions, it's not good if you're looking up like a single item, right? What's the date for this, or where is this? It's good when you have these general kind of questions. Um, I was even like looking for a word the other day that sounded more sophisticated than the one I had in my mind. And I asked it that. I was like, what's a more sophisticated, rarely used word for this word? And boom, it comes up with one in 5 seconds. Like, to have that while you're writing is really kind of neat. So I'm like using this all the time, or when it comes to medical stuff or things you want to know about. It's the idea of summarizing complicated research questions. Now, if you're not kind of curious about the world, or you don't have these kind of questions popping into your head, yeah, I mean, maybe this stuff isn't as useful. But like, here's another example. I was talking about, oh yeah, there was the Microsoft Store has some great sales this week on movies. They have a bunch for $4.99, and some that I was really into. And one of them was Southland Tales, which was directed by Richard Kelly. He did Donnie Darko. This was his follow-up to that movie. And the movie came out and had very mixed reactions, mostly negative as well, and it didn't do well at the box office. And I was telling my best friend that, and he's like, "Oh, I never even heard of that movie." And I was like, "Oh yeah," and I just told him what I just told him, and I was like, "But I'm like, since it came out," and I was trying to recall like this was true, but I was like, I'm pretty sure I've read since it came out, and this was like it came out a long time ago. Uh, it's been a lot of revision to it in terms of what people think about it. It's kind of like a famous movie called They Live when that came out. John Carpenter was trashed when it came out, and then years later became a cult classic. And that's kind of where Southland Tales was. But then I was like, is that true? Or did I just make that up? So I punched it in into Copilot, and I asked, like, has the thoughts and opinions around the movie Southland Tales changed since its first release? And sure enough, Copilot gave me this full response and said, yes, yeah, it's been revised and people have reconsidered it. And now, da 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 da. And just to have that, I just sent him that little block. I thought that was super cool. So I find this stuff really, really, really useful. But I'm also one of those people that I'm really curious about the world. I'm always asking weird questions. I want to know stuff. I'm always looking things up. And it's not stuff I could just look up in a search engine. Like I could, but I'm going to then open up 5 to 10 links and have to read all that. And then in my head, I'll have to have a summary of what I learned. So that's where I find all this stuff useful. So I hope other people are using it more because I find it super cool. But there you go.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to see usage numbers for Copilot on Windows. I imagine it's quite high in enterprises because I think enterprises have to pay for it, right? So I'm surely they've probably got people using it. But when it comes to end users and it being free, I would love to know the metrics on how many people have clicked it and used it, and how many people continued to use it. Because obviously everyone's going to click it once to see how it is and stuff, but have people worked it into their lives, and is it like a daily thing they go into now? I'd love to see the numbers on that.
I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised if it's not that high.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. I bet it's not that high, but that's why I think people need to change their mindset and how they think about it. Like if you're a video game player, like, and you start playing a new game and you're stuck on a level, a lot of us will just punch that into a search engine and you'll get a couple articles that come up. But if you punched it into Copilot, you're going to get a summary of it. That's real. What's nice is not only you'll get a summary of it, it'll cut out all the fluff usually too. It'll just give you the answer. But what's great about it, and this is why I really like it, is it gives you all the sourcing to it. So like if you want to know more, you just click that link and it's going to open up the page where you can read more about the thing you want. But like you can just get it for so much, ideas for dinner, if you want to learn about certain animals. Like I said, it comes down to if you're kind of curious about the world and you're asking sort of, bigger questions. And I say that because I've met a lot of people who don't do that. They're pretty basic, right? They go in their life and they just do their thing and that's it. They're not really that curious about the world or, don't have these questions. And that's totally fine. And I'm not judging anyone. Knowledge is both awesome and a burden for a lot of people. But I feel like that's where it's becoming used. But I think we're just at the beginning of this stuff. As I previously said, the big thing with AI is going to be the APIs getting into developers' hands, which you'll talk about in a second here with Ignite, and letting developers go and do stuff with it that we haven't thought of. And you really need to, like, I made that analogy last week when you go back to the internet, and this is where I agree with Nadella. Back, when 1994, no one was like, oh yeah, let's just make YouTube, let's make a TikTok, let's make Google Maps, let's make like let's make Yelp, let's do was it Willow, the one for finding houses. Like there was it's not like those ideas just came to people. We're like, oh my God, let's just build this stuff right now. It took years for the technology to come around, people come up with ideas and the infrastructure to allow that stuff to happen. But now we have what we have today. And don't forget, when the internet came out, its primarily use, of course, was a PC. What's its primarily use now? A smartphone. No one saw that thing either. So this is just the beginning of all this stuff. And where it is now is not where it's going to be. So for people who don't use this stuff, don't worry, it's going to change. And it won't all be a dedicated app like a Copilot. It's going to be like I love in Paint now. Dude, Microsoft Paint, that ability to just remove a background.
Yeah.
I'm one of these people. I am an older gentleman. So I missed Zach's generation, where apparently everybody just grew up editing videos and photos, and it's just like, yeah, you just do this and that and that. Like I don't even use, I said this before, I don't use Photoshop. I do a lot of the photos for the main site. I don't use Photoshop. I use Photoshop Elements, a stripped down version. I find Photoshop just too much. So for me, ripping out the background for a photo, like, I don't know. That's like, I know how to kind of do it, but it's like, you have to do it manually and trace, and it's just like, it never looks the same. Dude, like Microsoft Paint, you're like, photo, do it. And it's like, bloop, and it just literally
Yeah.
changes. And you're like, now I have that, and now I can put that onto any background. I was like, oh my God, like to have, and that's the same technology, but you're not launching Microsoft Paint AI. You're just launching Microsoft Paint. It just has a new option in there that does it. How it does it, you don't, who cares? And then it has the generate too, where you can generate your own images. Like that's where you're going to see a lot of this stuff happening. But
Yeah.
there you go.
No, I
That's my
fully
rant on
agree.
Copilot.
Yeah, so I guess that's the Windows 10 news. Quite interesting times and interesting ideas from the new Windows team, how they're sort of viewing Windows and OS updates and stuff going forward. We should move on to the next topic now, that, of course, being Windows 11. And I guess this actually applies to Windows 10 as well. But this is more to do with the European Economic Area and the Digital Markets Act specifically. So for those who don't know what the Digital Markets Act is, it's essentially a set of rules, a set of laws in the European Union and surrounding economic area, which is trying to mandate that big tech companies with massive online platforms aren't able to control every aspect of that platform. They want to ensure that third-party services and developers have a fair share, a fair chance at competing with the first-party services and apps and whatnot. And they also want to ensure that users have choice. And can, make the OS or the platform what they want it to be. And so obviously this affects iOS, it affects Android, and it affects Windows as well. In the case of Windows, Microsoft announced this week their changes to Windows to comply with the Digital Media Markets Act. And in those changes come a few interesting additions to Windows for PCs in the EU and surrounding economic area. So we'll go through them now. The first one is the ability to uninstall Microsoft Edge completely. So, you see Microsoft Edge in the start menu, right-click it, select uninstall, the browser disappears. Of course, the engine that powers it with U2 remains in the OS because that powers a number of other elements in the system. But the browser, the end-user browsing experience, can be uninstalled. The second one, and this is a huge one, the ability to remove Bing from Windows Search. So if you don't want Bing there, you can disable it, and the Windows Search pane would just be a thing for searching locally if you want it to be, which is wild. The third one is the ability to turn off the Microsoft Start newsfeed and the ads feed by addition in the widgets board. So you'll be able to go into the widgets board settings, disable Microsoft Start, and only use it with widgets if you want. There's a few other things that they're making changes to that we've already seen. Things like how system apps are now identified in the system, because one of the rules states that if it's not a system component, it should be uninstallable by the end user. And so Microsoft has now had to go into the apps list and sort of identify which apps are system, so that if the user tries to right-click and uninstall it, they know why they can't, because it's technically part of the OS. But that's also why you've seen Microsoft make changes to the inbox apps list, and is why now more apps than ever, almost any app in that comes preloaded in Windows can now be uninstalled, including things like Photos, Cortana, Camera, Mail, everything, bar things like Phone Link and File Explorer, which are technically system components and cannot be uninstalled. And, Edge is now on that list. It's crazy. You can basically install Windows and then uninstall almost all inbox apps, which is a huge change to how things were a few years ago. There are a couple of other changes as well. Things like Microsoft ensuring that Windows respects the user's defaults for apps. So things like browser and email clients. Obviously, Windows has had a rocky road there, where sometimes it would forget or it wouldn't listen to your default when you're selecting links and stuff in certain areas of the system. In the European Economic Area, Windows will always respect your defaults because it has to. And yeah, there are a couple other minor changes. I think there's more changes to be announced as well in regards to what PCs in these areas will be able to do under the Digital Markets Act. But yeah, these are absolutely huge changes to Windows. This is obviously not great news for Microsoft, who kind of want to propel their services and their things. Of course, they want you to use Bing and Search. Of course, they want you to use Microsoft Start in the widgets board. But along with these rules, it not only as the user should be able to disable them, but the user should be able to choose the service they want to use. And so Microsoft is actually making some of these areas interoperable. What that means is things like the Microsoft widgets board. Not only can you disable Microsoft Start, but a developer or another service could come along and build their own service that you can implement into the widgets board. So Google, if it wanted to, could build a Google News widget or feed for the widgets board that you could install and enable. And so instead of seeing Microsoft Start in there, you now see Google News. The same goes for Windows Search, right? If you can turn off Bing, but this is interoperable. So Google could come along and build a plugin for the Windows Search pane that a user could install, and now you've got Google in the Windows Search pane. That is a huge deal, I think. I think this is the thing Microsoft really didn't want to implement. But yeah, so users could ideally replace Microsoft Start and Bing Search with Google News and Google Search in the Windows Start pane and the Windows Widgets board. That's insane, but it's becoming possible thanks to the Digital Markets Act. I keep saying Media Act, I don't know why. The Digital Markets Act. There's a downside to this news, and that's Microsoft is region locking these changes to the European Economic Area, and you can bet they're going to try and keep that locked there. I think this is quite dirty of them, because this could very easily be a universal toggle. I'm pretty sure some of this was announced, or at least began work internally as a feature that was supposed to be universal. I'm pretty sure Microsoft did announce the ability to remove the news feed from the widgets board at Build earlier this year. They did not announce that as a European only thing. That was announced as a thing that everybody would be able to do, and now suddenly it's locked to the European Economic Area, which I find very suspicious. Yeah, it's not cool that Microsoft is locking this down to PCs in Europe only. It should be a thing that every PC user should be able to configure, because it's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? Microsoft announced this stuff as, we're all for user choice. We want to comply with these laws. We agree with these laws. And then at the same time, they're like, oh, by the way, we only agree and want users to have choice in these areas where we're legally forced to. Everywhere else, you've got to be using our stuff, please. It's so annoying, because me being in the UK, who was once part of the EU and stuff, I'm missing out by this much, by one channel between the UK and France. It's not fair. Obviously in the US and stuff, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but over here I'm pretty annoyed. And yeah, I'm assuming there's going to be ways to force this on versions of Windows that aren't set to a region in the EU and surrounding economic area. But it's just annoying that we're going to have to do that, right? It's a good thing Microsoft is building in the avenues to make this easier once we enable it. But yeah, what do you think, Dan?
So, I mean, I agree with, them having to do this. I personally don't mind a lot of that stuff. I said it before, but I'm also like, it takes a lot to annoy me. Yeah. So, unless you're making comments in our podcast, apparently. But like, so I agree that they should be doing this. As far as the US stuff, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hypocritical, but it's a business at the end of the day. They need to make money, and they make money through a lot of this stuff. And so I understand the resistance to wanting to do it. That said, the current trends in the US market is following Europe. I don't know if we'll quite get there with as strict regulations as Europe is implementing. But right now, Google's on a trial, right? With the FTC, I believe it's the FTC. There's a lot of animosity towards the big tech companies and their control over things, whether it's Google's search and their dominance and how, what was it? They pay Apple something like 20 or 30 billion dollars
Yeah.
to make Google the default search engine. Like that's insane. That's an insane amount of money. And were Apple to lose that money, like it would actually hurt their profits. Like it's like an insane amount. So that seems a little unfair. Should you just be able to pay an extraordinary amount? That's per year, if I recall. That's an extraordinary amount of money just to make your search engine the default. But that's because Google makes so much money off of search. And then, of course, you have Apple with their App Store, and not that Google is innocent there either. And there's a lot of pushback now on those stores because they operate as monopolies and control over, how things are done. They're taking this large percentage of was a 30% cut of apps and games and stuff like that. So there's pushback. And the good news is Microsoft's about to get a lot of practice about how to quickly undo that stuff for Windows, which means if this changes in the US at some point, which I'm 50-50 on. I'm not saying it's going to happen because we're technically anti-regulation here, but we're not because now it's funny. We're anti-regulation. That is until it starts to bother someone. And in this case, it's bothering the right wing. So the right wing, who's traditionally small government, hates government interventions, now like, we need to regulate these tech companies. It's like, wait, what? Oh, that's right. They're doing stuff that you don't like now. So, okay, that makes sense. So if that happens, though, Microsoft would then be able to sort of replicate that here. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to go down that path, and other countries do as well. So
yeah, I'm guessing the reason why they've built this out so much because, like I said, like they're building out like services and stuff, like the ability to host search providers and news providers in the Microsoft Store and stuff. It's weird to region lock that to just the X amount of countries that are in the European Economic Area. Because like there are millions of users who would benefit from this. Of course, that doesn't benefit Microsoft from a business perspective, and especially now with the Windows Web Experiences team being a combination of Windows and web experiences. Web experiences being Microsoft Start, Bing. Of course, they don't want users to be able to turn off those things because that's half their business. That's half the team. And so I'm sure there's a little bit of butting heads here because I think under Panos Panay, I think this would have been global. There's a reason why the thing was announced at Build, being able to turn off the newsfeed for everybody was announced at Build because Panos Panay was like, I don't want those damn ads in Windows. Let's add a feature that turns them off. And now Panos is gone and the Web Experiences team is now in charge. They're like, oh, about that thing that Panos said you guys are working on. Yeah, we're only doing that for markets where we legally have to. And so it is a shame. But I fully agree with you. I think, if the US government sort of steps in and starts to force this upon Microsoft and other companies as well, then of course they can very easily switch that on in other regions. I think it's this is good for the end user, right? There's nothing really bad about this for you and me and us people who use these products who aren't making them, who aren't part of the companies that build them. It's only bad news for companies. For the companies, it's bad news for Apple, it's bad news for Microsoft, it's bad news for Google. Maybe less so Google, because obviously everyone uses Chrome and Google Search anyway. So these other platforms them having to make things interoperable doesn't really affect them as much. Because for years, I think Android's had to give you the choice of whether or not you want Google or Bing or Yahoo or whatever it is when you set up an Android phone. And I'm betting you 95% of people just choose Google anyway. Like the option has been there forever on Android. It hasn't affected their market share. So
I was actually just reading the stats on this. 36% of Americans have switched their default browser
to what? To Chrome?
So that's how you. So it's important how you read that.
Yeah,
number, right. So it's like, all right, they switched, but
from
that
what?
means that. Yeah, it mostly means they know how to switch from Edge to Chrome.
Yeah.
Because all you need to then do is look at browser market share, and you can see, Edge is growing. Don't get me wrong. I think it was 10.7%, and now it's 11.8%, and that's just changed in a couple months. So it is growing, but it's percentage. But listen, they're 11.8%, and Google is, I think it was 60 something. This is from Statista. You can go look it up. But this was the latest numbers. And Google's numbers are kind of coming down a little bit. It's like around 60% now. So Microsoft is gaining there. But yeah, and I was discussing this with someone on, I think it was Twitter or Threads or one of those. But, getting people to switch browsers is really hard.
Not on Windows,
Just
though.
because. No, I don't mean switching as in the actual act of. I mean to change over from a brand to a new
I see.
brand.
Yeah, right.
Because it's not a rational decision. So going after them with rational arguments, this is a big thing with psychology in general. This is where a lot of people fault left-wing people, because left-wing people are like, here's a fact, here's a fact, here's a fact. And like a lot of people who are thinking emotionally don't care about that stuff. It just kind of goes over their head. So you can't always argue with facts with people because it doesn't mean anything to them. But it's sort of the same here with browsers, where you can be like, oh, Edge is better than Chrome because of this and this and this. And I would agree with you. I think, Edge has a lot of cool features in it that are unique and different enough that I value. But a lot of users kind of don't care. Like they would even benefit from that stuff where to start using it. But I mean, they don't care in the sense they don't want to go through the effort of learning a new browser, learning where things are. At least they can now import bookmarks and passwords. Like that's been made easier. But it's like learning it's like that discussion we had, about Macs, right?
Yeah.
We love their hardware, but we don't switch to them because we don't like the operating system. And it's not that we can't use it or we wouldn't even find value in using it once we switched. It's the idea of getting used to it we don't like.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing with browsers. So I understand why Microsoft fights this stuff. But.
Yeah, and this was the point I was getting to. Like, even though Google, Microsoft, and Apple are all affected by these laws and all have to sort of implement the same sort of policies and abilities for the end user, I think Microsoft has the most to lose here because, as I said with Google, people choose Google Chrome anyway. People choose Google Search, even on Google-made platforms. Microsoft, even with its own platform, people choose Google. They want to use Google Chrome. They want to use Google Search. And so Microsoft has the most to lose here because Windows was their only avenue for forcing its own services onto users. And now this is, I think, the reason why they are region locking this. I don't think you're going to see Chrome or Google or Apple region lock these things when they come out with them next, whenever they do. I think Google's already doing stuff, but Apple obviously has announced RCS support coming next year, and I think this is in regards to the Digital Markets Act. But it's also they've also announced sideloading, because one of the Digital Markets Act's rules and requirements is a user should not be locked to one specific app store. You should be able to get apps from anywhere. And so that's why Apple is announcing sideloading. I'll be curious to see if that's region locked or if that's available to everybody. Actually, for Apple, it might be region locked because Apple's very much like, security. We want control of every aspect of your phone. But Google, I don't think cares. Google has no bother. They're like, yeah, everyone chooses us anyway, so everyone can have it. So I guess we'll see.
It's I don't know how you solve this. Microsoft's in a rut when it comes to. I mean, not in a rut. Like I said, their browser market share is growing, and it's not like insignificant. It's a consistent uptick, which is good. But like when it comes to search, it's still a losing battle. I think the solution to search, not the solution, but would help, is just what I was referring to. Is there has to be some kind of limits where companies can't pay $20-30 billion to another company to make them use their browser. Like, that doesn't seem like free market to me. Like, that seems like two companies colluding together.
But it's not like
Apple
Microsoft
gets $20 billion and Google gets their app. And meanwhile, the customer is left on the sideline to, bear that decision, the results of that decision. I don't see how that's a free market thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But on the flip side, it's not like Microsoft couldn't afford to beat that. If Microsoft really wanted being as default.
Right. But like, I think that would be, it wouldn't be. So Google is spending that money to keep their market share, which is massive, and they make a massive amount of money. Microsoft would be doing it to win market share.
Yes.
And I don't think that would necessarily, like, if Microsoft did that and like spent $30 billion, I would still guarantee you 90% of people or 95% of people would still switch to
Yeah,
Chrome
I
or
think you're
whatever
right.
browser they preferred.
I think you're right.
So
Or the
it's
alternative to that is people would use it not realizing it isn't Google, and so they would still think they're using Google. Because a lot of people, sometimes even I'll do it. I'll like type in to the address bar and forget that it's set to Bing and just assume I'm using Google. I think a lot of people would do that, and then whenever they go to actually being like, oh, let me do a Google search, it's like they're still in the mindset they're Google users and they're still using Google like manually. But yeah, like the other thing I sort of want to bring up, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Dan. Like, how far do these EU laws go? Because obviously, especially in regards to Apple, they've mandated a lot of things that has sort of flown in the face of some of these big tech companies' visions for their products.
I was just going to say I brought that up earlier with Apple using RCS to make iMessage interoperable with Android phones. The only reason that's happened, like Apple didn't say it, but we all know the reason is because Europe and the DMA said, we're taking a hard look at this. And before they got regulated, Apple said, fine, we'll do it.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same with the USB-C port on the new iPhone. Like, one of their rules is they can't use proprietary chargers anymore. They have to use a universal standard, that being USB-C. Where does this end? Like, at what point does the law say, right, if you make hardware, it should be available for any developer to build software, an OS for it? So if you buy an iPhone, Google should be able to build Android for it, and the user should be able to choose between iOS and Android. Sure. How far does this go? Well, Macs, again, this all affects Apple primarily. If you buy a Mac with an ARM chip, it should be able to run Windows natively. There's no reason for it not to. Like, is this where this is going, or is there a roof here? Or is there a level where we hit the ceiling? It's like we don't need
There's definitely a roof here, but this is what I've always articulated and I still stand by, which is capitalism is inherently contradictory. So everybody's like free market, and it's like everybody loves the free market when you're the new guy and you're trying to compete. You don't like the free market when you're the leader.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so if you're Google, you're going to do your best to be a monopoly, as close as you can to that law to skirt that, so that because you don't want competition. Yeah, it makes good fodder if you're in an economic class to be like, well, we all benefit from competition and because it drives us to work hard. Yeah, that's true. Companies don't want that. Why does it? They don't have to spend as much innovating to compete. Why would they do it? That's the problem. Like, this was brought up with Intel, right? They dominated the market for such a long time because AMD wasn't there. And Intel sat on its laurels and just, things weren't great. Do you blame Intel? Their job is to make money. Why are they going to go spend more into R&D, more into fab processes and make these brand new chips when they don't have any competition? They could just be like, well, we don't need to rush to do any of this stuff because we don't feel any heat. We're the only game in town. What are you going to do about it? Now the AMD stepped in. Now they're doing it, right? So if you're in a monopoly position, yeah, you're going to fight this. And Apple's like that in the United States, So all these companies, that's why they're all liars. I just mentioned like this thing with Google paying Apple what, $20 to $30 billion just to use their search engine on iPhones. It's like, that is not free market. That's two companies colluding behind the backs of consumers, and then the consumers have to just deal with the ramifications of it. That's not a decision that was made because the market decided it. That was just two companies decided to.
The reason why people don't complain about that is because people do use Google search. Could you imagine if this was Microsoft doing that and they were paying Apple $30 billion to keep Bing as the default? People would be in outrage.
Oh, yeah. Of course, because Microsoft is easy to pick up and pick on, and they would of course bring back the whole browser integration war back in the day when they were almost broken up. But this is where regulations are important, because regulations, especially in tech is now having very profound effects on society at a faster rate, I would argue, than it ever has. Like, a lot of tech happened in the 20th century. Don't get me wrong. We went from, the Wright brothers, little jet that flew, 20 feet or 12 feet or whatever it was, to going to the moon within 60 years, right? So that was a big change. And the advent of just flying changed the economy, but it was a slow thing. It didn't alter people's psychology. And that's kind of the issue right now with tech, right? That people are concerned about that. We're spending all this time on TikTok. We're getting bad news or inaccurate news that's out there that's not self-correcting, which the market isn't correcting for either. And it's like, so it's having this profound impact on society. And that's why you're seeing governments get involved with this now. Nikki Haley, who's running for president here in the United States as a Republican, went on TV the other day and said that one of the first things she would do is mandate that social networks, you have to register with them, like with your ID. And use your real name and everything. Now, I've argued for this in the past before too. I didn't quite do it the way though she did. She made it so that if you're going to use a social network, you have to be registered and use your name. I said it should be bifurcated, that you should have basically registered users who use their real name, and then you should have like anonymous users. And when you sign into it, you can basically just, it's kind of like right now a verified. Like you could just weed out the non-verified people and just see verified and leave it like that. I think that would still go a long way. But South Korea does this, and China, I think, does this too, because there is a danger to society about allowing just anyone to go post stuff on the internet. And now with AI and creating fake images and fake videos and spreading fake news, and you have something like Twitter who's like, well, we're not going to really regulate any of that stuff. And it's like, at what point is freedom of speech, especially super important in the United States, outweighs what's happening into society? Like, what do you do with TikTok, and its algorithms? Because I've said this before too. The human brain, like, we like to think we're super smart, but we're just basically like robots and animals. Like, you can just trick the brain into making it do what you want. If you don't believe me, if you've never seen The Magician, like,
Yeah.
their whole job is literally it's about looking at human psychology and finding all the holes in it and then doing their things around that. That's all that is, right? So I don't, there is a role here for government. It's just, governments, you get into bureaucracy, you get into people who are making laws and they don't know necessarily what they're talking about. That happens here in the United States. And do you, at one point, this could help, evolution and of technology. Like, if you, for instance, if like what you were saying before, making the iPhone be able to like run Android, like that would actually kind of help Android. It would help other people create operating systems. Like, it would open up competition. So that would actually be good for the market if you're
Yeah.
into competition. Of course, it could work the other way too, that where bureaucracy is so difficult and so hard that companies are like, well, we're not going to bother trying. Like, you look at California, they have like notoriously strict regulations on building stuff where it can take like 2 years to get something approved, even just for a residential address, to like build a shed or something like that. So then regulation is like now really hurting the economy and stuff. So it's a fine line. It's not, you can't just let tech run rampant though. It's become too powerful. And now, of course, you have everybody talk about AI becoming too powerful. Like, it was good to see this week the United States and China had high level talks where they kind of agreed to start looking at cooperating on AI, because the concern is, the United States is going to try to regulate AI, Microsoft, Google, and everybody will be there. They'll agree to these standards. But then you have China, and China could be like, well, screw that. We're not going to do any of that. And then like you could start using their AI, and then people will start using it. And then it comes out later that AI is manipulating things, or doing whatever, just like the accusations of TikTok. And TikTok's hilarious, by the way. I keep bringing that up because we use it in the United States and other European countries, obviously, and it uses that algorithm. But in China, they don't use TikTok. We think they're stupid. No, they use there's another version of the app that they use that's highly regulated and controlled, that doesn't do the things that it does here in the United States. And it even limits how much you can use it per day, because China isn't stupid. They know how dangerous that app is, and damaging youth and distracting them. They even like mandated like kids can't use internet for more than like a couple hours a day and play games and all that stuff, because they want their kids, I don't know, to be engineers and learn stuff.
Yeah.
In the United States, it's like, oh, my kid was up to 5 a.m. gaming and he's on his phone all day, and we're just like, what to do about it? And then, people are like, you can't make a law because America and the Constitution. And it's just like, all right, I mean, we could go down that route, people, but China's going to probably end up beating us in a lot of these fields in the coming years, because our kids are literally stupid. And it's going to be because of this stuff, So where does government step in there? I don't know. These are tough problems, man. Like
Yeah.
this is why I don't have kids. I do not want to deal with this. I'm going to be like in Doctor Strangelove. I'm going to be smoking and riding that bomb, watching the world end, man.
Yeah. I mean,
You
tech
guys can all deal with it.
and social media stuff, it's like the new alcohol. I don't fully know the history of
Yes.
alcohol, but I imagine when it first came around, there were no laws about it and everybody was having all of it all the time and it was great. And then obviously everyone was drunk all the time. They had to mandate it.
Yeah.
So listen, you have to be over 18 and please don't drink this all the time because you're going to kill everybody and yourself.
Actually, I mean, that's a great example. I
Yeah.
can give you a specific case of it, which was absinthe.
Right.
Absinthe was popular in France in the late 1800s going into the 20th century. And it was very popular. It was a common drink, but there was two things associated with it. One, it got associated with people going crazy and like hallucinating and all this. And that was up until like a couple years ago, people still believed that. And one of the reasons why that happened was to get that green color. Some bootleggers were starting to use chemicals in it to get that color. And then people were drinking it and getting these weird effects, had actually nothing to do with the actual drink itself. But they didn't know that at the time. They didn't know what was happening. So that's why absinthe was banned for like, I think it was 80 years or something like that until the science came around. So actually that was all nonsense. It's a fine drink and you can have it. But that's what happens when you don't have regulations. It's like, yeah, people, and we had that too in the United States when we had prohibition. We actually did ban alcohol. And so you had bootleggers and they would cut it with all sorts of not the good types of alcohol that you want to be drinking with your alcohol. So you would get messed up, but kind of messed up in the wrong way. So yeah, it's a tough thing.
Yeah. Right, before we carry on, I should take a quick second to read this week's sponsor spot, and then we can move on to all the Microsoft Ignite stuff. So this episode of the Windows Central podcast is sponsored by Indeed. When it comes to hiring talent, don't wait for great talent to find you. Find them first with Indeed. Indeed is a powerful hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates, and with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume is on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. One of the things we think is pretty awesome about Indeed is that they do the hard work for you. Indeed shows you candidates whose resumes matches the description, as I just mentioned, and so you can hire people a lot faster. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is... sorry, I've scrolled the wrong way. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. So start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/WCP. That offer is good for a limited time only. That's a $75 sponsored job credit now at Indeed.com/WCP. Indeed.com/WCP. Let them know you heard about them on our podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. Thank you, Indeed, for sponsoring. And now it's time to talk about the absolute tsunami of news that came out of Ignite.
Oh wow, we got another hour to go.
Yeah, I'll try and speed through the sort of heavy hitters here because
Yeah.
a lot of, like I said, a lot of this certainly isn't of interest to us here at Windows Central. But there was some big stuff coming out of the event. We'll start with, I think, the rebrand of Bing Chat, which is a simple topic to get through. Microsoft finally did it. This is a thing we've been talking about for a bit. The Copilot branding has been confusing this whole year. It obviously started in February with Bing Chat. The term Copilot, I think, wasn't uttered until a month later when they announced the Windows 365 Copilot, which is obviously Microsoft AI in Office. And then since then, they've sort of taken the Copilot brand and ran with it. When they announced Copilot for Windows, it was Copilot for Windows with Bing Chat. That was the name of it. And when you opened it up, it said with Bing Chat in there. But now at Ignite, they have announced that Bing Chat is actually getting a rebrand. It's no longer called Bing Chat. It's called Copilot in Bing. And that aligns with the way Microsoft is marketing or naming, I guess, its AIs across all of its services. It's Copilot in Microsoft 365, Copilot in Windows, Copilot in Bing, Copilot in Azure Copilot, and wherever the hell that Copilot could go these days, that's how it's being named now. So there's no Bing chat anymore. It's Copilot in Bing. From a UI perspective, it's exactly the same. Functionally, it's exactly the same. It's just no longer called Bing Chat. And I think that's a good thing that they're aligning on their branding here. Microsoft is sort of very aware that over the years, they've not been very good at naming products. And so with this one, they're nipping it in the bud early and going, right, it's just all Copilot. And depending on where you're using it, it's Copilot in X for the variation. Copilot in Loop, Copilot in Word, stuff like that. So good news on that front. I think that makes perfect sense. We should also talk about ARM, believe it or not. There was a big ARM announcement at Microsoft Ignite. Specifically, and this has been rumored for a while, but it's now official. Microsoft is building its own ARM computing chip for the cloud. This is called the Cobalt 100 CPU. And while I don't think they released many specs on it. They seem to be confident that this is going to be up there with the chips they were currently using in the Microsoft Cloud, but with better performance, with a better performance to efficiency ratio. That's, of course, the big selling point of ARM, right? The idea is ARM is low power, and so it reduces the electricity bill on server farms, and so Microsoft would like to use ARM chips more in its servers. And so the Cobalt 100 CPU, which is built by Microsoft, to my knowledge, it's not a Qualcomm design chip, it's not any other design. This was a chip they built in-house at Microsoft and is now deploying, or will be deploying it more broadly early next year. It will operate alongside third-party chips. It's not going to just exclusively power the Microsoft Cloud. I don't think Microsoft could make that many to do that. So, of course, you'll still have the options from AMD and NVIDIA and whatever else it is they're using in those servers. But Microsoft's own chips will be an additional chip that they start rolling out to their server fleet in 2024. And alongside that chip, Microsoft actually announced two chips. They announced the ARM compute chip, and they're also announcing a dedicated AI processing chip, an NPU, if you will. They never called it an NPU, but it's more or less doing the same thing. They called this the Maya AI Accelerator. And this will be what they use to handle AI workloads. So right now, I believe Microsoft has been using NVIDIA GPUs to do this. And I think they will continue to use NVIDIA GPUs in certain areas. But the Maya AI Accelerator, Microsoft's second own in-house designed chip, will actually take over in certain places. And it will power things like Microsoft Copilot in certain areas, certain companies, etc., etc. And yeah, again, Microsoft's touting great performance to efficiency ratios and stuff. This mainly benefits Microsoft, of course, because it's their bill at the end of the day when it comes to server farms and stuff. We don't know what the performance is going to be like. We don't know how it's going to compare with all the other chips that you can find in the Microsoft Cloud, but it is something they're working on, and Microsoft seems to be very proud of these new chips. They're touting them big time, and they even announced that they're already working on a second generation set of chips for the cloud. So that's fun to see. Microsoft is all in on this. They're big on silicon. They've said that they have a big in-house silicon team. They've been working on this stuff for many years behind the scenes, like with the door closed. And we're only now just sort of seeing the fruits of their labor in regards to performance and general computing chips. Because obviously Microsoft has built custom silicon before in regards to things like the custom processor that powers the Surface Pen on Surface devices, as well as the holographic chip in HoloLens 2. I believe that was also Microsoft custom silicon. But the Cobalt 100 CPU specifically is the first sort of general computing chip from Microsoft. What I mean by that is, I guess the sort of goal is you can install Windows on it and you can use Windows on it. Obviously, it's not going to be a chip you find in end-user hardware. It will only be in the cloud. But if you're using Windows 365, for example, and that PC is hosted on a cloud PC in Microsoft server farms, that may be running on a Cobalt 100 CPU. And so that's what I mean by general compute chip. It's the first step into chips as you and I know them, I guess. And could this extend at some point into an end user sort of Surface device? I think it could. I think if Microsoft is able to build a chip that does compete with Qualcomm and Intel, there's no reason why they shouldn't. Of course, if they do that, it would have to be exclusive to Surface. I don't think they can enter the chip game and sell chips, because I think that would be bad news. But also, I think if they do that, they would also have to offer it alongside Intel and Qualcomm. They can't just make a Surface that's exclusively Microsoft silicon powered. I don't think that'd be fair. No, you disagree?
Well, I think they could. I think it'll take a lot to get there.
Yeah.
That said, I think, Nadella is being smart here, and, they would have that ability to pivot, right? For instance, last week we had that funny discussion about Qualcomm needing a license from ARM, for the new chips, which
Yeah.
right now they don't. And to be honest, I don't think that would even stop them coming to market. Like I'm pretty sure, if they had ARM's not going to be like, well, we're not going to give you a license now, even though we won the court case, because then ARM will just lose a huge chunk of market share from Qualcomm and not get any money, right? So of course they'd rather get a licensing deal than no deal. Uh, so I think that nothing will happen there. That said, I think you're right in the sense that if Microsoft thinks they could do it better somehow,
Yeah.
or something happens that they might go down that route that they could. I think between Intel being on a tear, Meteor Lake's about to come out, which is supposed to be a really massive jump in efficiency. And then they still have Lunar Lake coming out after that. I heard someone was telling me, I won't say who, that they've seen Intel's roadmap like through 2028.
Oh.
Like, so OEMs are being briefed on Intel's plans through like 2028 for the processors, right? So that's happening. I think between that and Qualcomm's new chip, and then of course you still got AMD. You don't want to count AMD. I don't see what value, like how much better could a Microsoft chip could be, even if they could pull that off, which I'm not 100% sure. But one of the reasons why they're doing this, because this eats into technically would be NVIDIA's market share, but one of the problems NVIDIA's having right now is meeting market demand. They're
Yeah.
so busy. Their stuff is so popular that they can't ship enough stuff to customers. And that causes a problem for the market too, because the market is like, come on, we need this, we need this. And Microsoft, I think, was a little bit worried, with having everything based on NVIDIA, and not being able to meet what they needed to do, that they kind of made this chip, which is supposed to be optimized. They did work with OpenAI on this chip. At least the AI accelerator, I should say, was optimized for AI tools and all that. So maybe it is a little bit more efficient going down that route. They want to use these tools because, as we mentioned with ARM, it is more efficient in terms of power, usage. If you're making huge data farms, having an ARM chip over anything else is going to be like saves on heat, saves on electricity, because don't forget, with all that heat, you need cooling. It's a big deal. But I still wouldn't. So I don't think they're going to come out with their own chip for Surface. No. And I think if they were to do it, they would just make it exclusive to Surface. The reason is, I think they would still be open. Like if Intel came out with a chip and their chip was just better, I'm sure Microsoft would probably do that.
Yeah.
I don't see Microsoft though entering the chip game and making the chips for anyone else. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think they would make it available to HP or Dell, even though they may want to. I think Dell would cross the line too far with Intel. And Qualcomm too, at that point. So I don't think that will happen.
Yeah, so there are some specs that I think Microsoft's published, or at least people have sort of sleuthed. The Cobalt 100 is a 5nm, 128 core ARM Neoverse N2 chip. These are server grade chips, of course, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
ServeTheHome.com says it's roughly like a Skylake era Intel Xeon chip in terms of integer performance at a lower power point and significantly high density. So yeah, these are very much server grade chips. Obviously, a Skylake era chip in an end user PC these days wouldn't be the greatest thing in the world. But again, it's Intel Xeon. Which is obviously the Xeon. For those who don't know, Xeon is very much workstation server grade chips, and so they're usually, in regards to performance, way ahead of what we get in end user things. They have way more cores, almost always, way more RAM. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But again, they run in massive server sort of shelves and whatnot, and so that's fine for that to be that way. But yeah, so. Yeah, this is Microsoft sort of venturing into the ARM chip space, I guess, for the first time properly. They're working on a second gen already, and so we'll see where this goes. As I said, Microsoft's silicon team internally is massive, and it would surprise me if they haven't at least considered an end user consumer chip for some hardware in the future. Right, let's move on to some other Microsoft Ignite news. Back to the Copilot. Microsoft Copilot is officially part of everything in Microsoft 365. Quite literally, they came out and said, hey, if you use a Microsoft 365 service, there will be a Copilot for it. So that's Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, Loop, Outlook. There's a Copilot dashboard. Listen, it's coming to everything and everyone. This is, of course, aimed primarily at enterprises right now, but end users who use Microsoft 365 for consumers, or whatever it's called, home, personal, whatever it is, there will be elements of Copilot that roll out to these apps at a later date. I believe 2024 is when there's at some point in 2024 is when they're targeting the consumer version of Copilot for Microsoft 365. But yes, there's also Copilot Pro, which is basically Bing Chat Enterprise. They've rebranded it to Copilot Pro, and so that has the commercial data protection and a few additional sort of enterprise grade things that the end user, normal users don't care about, don't need, which is kind of nice. There's also a new Copilot Studio being announced, which is essentially, let me see if I can find it here. It's essentially going to allow enterprises and businesses who use Copilot to create their own branded bots. If I can find the post here, give me 1 second. No, I can't find. Oh, there it is. Found it. Yeah. So this is very similar to what OpenAI already has, where you can create a custom version of ChatGPT with your own logo, your own brand, and its own sort of almost personality. You can hook it up to certain data sets and criteria and whatnot. Exactly the same here with Copilot Studio. With custom parameters and guardrails, Copilot Studio will allow Microsoft 365 Business to create tailor-made Copilots responding to queries based on your company's documentation and inputs. So this is basically an evolution. If you remember a few years ago at Build, one of the years at Build was all about AI bots. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And the idea was you could create your own custom bot using not AI, I guess, at the point. Now it's basically that, but with Bing Chat, Copilot powering things under the hood, which is pretty fancy. Along the same vein, almost, but not really, there's the Windows AI Studio, which Microsoft announced as well. And that is essentially a tool that will allow developers to sort of jumpstart their AI development in an app or a service. Because believe it or not, beginning to build AI-powered things is not easy, even for developers. So Microsoft wants to simplify that sort of rather streamline the setup process in things like VS Code, with a sort of walk-through program. It will ask you a bunch of questions. Hey, what kind of thing are you building? What kind of large language model do you think you would like to use? It can recommend you large language models. It can recommend you all these sort of different SLMs and stuff. And so it's ideally just going to streamline building AI-powered experiences on Windows, which is what Microsoft wants. Microsoft wants developers to view Windows as the platform for AI development. Of course they do. Even if that's cross-platform, they want you to be using Windows to build those experiences at the very least. Let's see here. What else do we have? We have the Windows app. This was a surprise announcement that was very popular with our audience. Microsoft is turning Windows into an app, kind of. Essentially, what they announced this week was a rebranded Windows 365 app, which now also incorporates all of Microsoft's cloud PC services, as well as the ability to set up your own remote desktop connections if you want. So if you want to use this as a personal user, you can set up a PC at home using the remote desktop protocol, and you can log into it using this new Windows app. It is just called Windows app. If you install it on iOS, it just says Windows and it's got a little Windows logo. It's kind of cool just to see Windows as an app and you click into it and stuff. But right now it's very much primarily aimed at businesses, right? It's power. It hooks into Windows 365. It hooks into Microsoft DevBox. It hooks into Azure Virtual Desktop. These are enterprise-grade services. For Windows 365, that I think is only the case for now. We've talked about this before, but we do know Microsoft wants to launch Windows 365 for consumers. That there's a consumer version of that service coming at some point, and this app will play nicely into that. I think actually this app lays the foundation for that consumer version, because the app itself acts as a hub. You can see all of the different cloud PCs in there across all the different services, but then it also breaks it down into apps as well. So you can actually see individual apps installed in these cloud PCs. And so if you're an end user, you can go and you can click and go to the app. You go, I just need to launch, I don't know, Photoshop. Click, then it'll pull you into your cloud PC and it will have Photoshop already running, ready for you to start using, which I think is pretty cool. The app itself is only available on iOS, iPadOS, and Windows, which is weird. I don't know why there isn't an Android app. The screenshot they gave press was of an Android app, but it's not available. It's not. They don't mention it in any of the blog posts. They don't mention it in the downloads area for the app. It's only iOS/iPadOS, Windows, and there's technically a web app. So you can sort of log into this using a web browser of your choice. On the subject of web browsers, Microsoft also announced a web version of Copilot. So Up until now, that was basically Bing Chat. If you wanted to use Copilot, you just go to bing.com/chat and you'd basically get the chat interface there. But with Bing Chat being rebranded to Copilot in Bing, Microsoft has actually launched a dedicated Copilot website. I think it's copilot.microsoft.com. And it does the same thing as all the Copilots that you can find anywhere else. It's just a web version. And what that means is Copilot can now be accessed across platforms, not just Windows or within Microsoft apps. You can now access it in a browser on the Mac, for example. Right now, it's only for Chromium browsers, I think, or maybe even Safari. And it's also only for desktop OSs. If you try to load it up using a mobile browser, it says we're not available yet, but that will be coming at some point. So if the goal for Microsoft was to bring Copilot to everything, they've achieved that with their new web app, which is pretty cool. In regards to Microsoft Teams, there was loads of Microsoft Teams announcements. We're only going to go through a couple of them here. First of all, Microsoft Teams Mesh and Immersive Spaces will be generally available starting January 2024. For those who don't know what those are, I don't blame you. Essentially, these are the VR versions of Teams where you can create, immersive spaces, and you can use it via a headset if you want to across platforms, whether that's be an Oculus or HoloLens. But it also works virtually on a PC as well. I think you can virtually move around some of these immersive spaces using keyboard and mouse. I don't know how Microsoft views this as productive. I really don't see this catching on with enterprises, but I guess this is the sort of the leftovers of the metaverse push that Microsoft and many other VR companies were going for a year or so ago. In regards to AI in Teams, Microsoft announced a bunch of stuff. But the biggest, most interesting one that I think was announced was this idea that this new sort of Snapchat filter, I guess you'd call it. It's not entirely like that, but using AI to clean up your room in the background. That's really cool. So if you're on camera in a Microsoft Teams meeting and you've got like an old coffee mug over there, or clothes hanging off a chair over there, you can just press a button in Teams, and using AI, when the app will analyze your background and go, okay, let's clean this up, and it will remove the coffee mug, it will remove the dirty clothes hanging on the chair, and so your room in the background looks a lot cleaner. That is a brilliant idea. I want that in Windows Studio Effects. Like, that should be built into Windows. It shouldn't just be a Teams thing. That should be something you can apply to anything. I should be able to apply that here on the podcast. That's such a cool idea. And that, I think, is the perfect example of AI that people want. People want AI that does that for you, cleans your room for you, so you don't have to worry about all the mess when you are late for a meeting. That's pretty cool. And so starting in 2024, Teams will also be able to isolate a speaker's voice using AI, very similar to the built-in Windows Studio Effects voice clarity feature. It is quite interesting that Teams is essentially mimicking a lot of Windows Studio Effects here, but without requiring an NPU. Pretty much every AI function in Teams doesn't require an NPU. It just uses the CPU to utilize it, which is interesting because I wouldn't say work laptops are very powerful. Here, the company we work for, they sent out first gen Surface laptop Go's. Intel 10th gen processor, 8 gig of RAM, 16 gig of RAM maybe. These aren't powerful laptops, and Teams is getting all of these crazy AI features that do not require an NPU to utilize. It just does it all off the NPU.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I was going to say, things without NPU. So yeah, it's going to use the CPU, or if there's a GPU on there. The downside of this is, I imagine, if you're using Teams and you're using this, your CPU usage will be high.
Yeah.
It's going to tax it, right? Your fans will probably come on more, but they have to do this. You couldn't make it require an NPU because it's going to take years for enterprise to get new laptops with NPUs. It'll happen. Maybe 5 years from now, you'll have enough of a critical mass where you can start to then kind of like, oh, this needs an NPU. But for now, so how you just get around that, though, I imagine, is hopefully there's some code where it'll use the CPU when there's no NPU on board. If there's a GPU and no NPU, it'll use the GPU. And then if it detects an NPU, it'll then use that for it. That's how you get around that. So when people do get NPU laptops, I bet the efficiency in battery usage and all that will much improve using this feature. I can't see how this feature and don't forget, like I'm blowing my background right now with NVIDIA broadcast, right? But that's using a beefy 4080 Ti GPU to make that happen. You can use it in a laptop too, but it's going to use a lot of resources, but it's not taxing my CPU. Um, so the stuff you're talking about doing with that generative and it cleans up and it looks really cool. If what they showed is actually how it works, it's really awesome.
Yeah.
But there's no way that can't be like CPU intensive to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I imagine though, and but then again, I could be a little bit wrong here in the sense I'm not 100% sure what it's actually doing. I think is it taking like a photo of your back of your room basically, cleaning it up and creating its own image that's just like a wallpaper
That's
image.
what I thought, but the way it's described is, as I mentioned, it's more like a Snapchat filter, and I don't know if Snapchat filters are different in that regard. I think they're more rendered live. I don't know because it stops working if you were to move your hands around, right? But then obviously, I guess Teams can just actively cut out your hands. Like, I don't know. I don't know how it's doing it. I genuinely have no idea. So I guess we'll try it out and we'll see if we can trick it.
Because if you think about it, like the problem here, what before would be like, well, Dan, how could it create a wallpaper when you're in the way? Right?
Yeah. No, exactly. It could use generative
but
fill,
you
I
can.
guess. It can assume.
Generative fill is now a thing. Like it'll just interpret and figure out what's there. And why not just make it like a background of your room? But then you can still get that weird kind of I'm behind a green screen effect, which so I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to watch.
You'll possibly be like, you've got a dirty room, I can tell.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I want to highlight from Ignite, like I said, there were hundreds of announcements. So it's not going to go through all of them. If you want to sort of get the lowdown on all of the Ignite announcements, you can go to news.microsoft.com and they've got everything there. But the last thing I would sort of briefly mention is Microsoft announced a bunch of Windows 365 enhancements, new features and stuff, starting with GPU support. So up until now, cloud PCs on the Windows 365 service have only been with air quotes integrated and GPUs. Whatever the VM was set to, there was no dedicated GPU option, so no NVIDIA and stuff. But now that's changing. Starting soon, you'll be able to configure a cloud PC with a dedicated GPU. This is very handy for enterprises using the service for creative workflows. So if you have employees that you need cloud PCs to edit photos or video, that will now be possible using cloud PCs with dedicated GPUs, which is pretty cool. They're also adding some AI stuff to it. So enterprises will be able to use AI to determine what kind of cloud PCs they need for their fleets I guess, for their employees and whatnot, which is kind of cool. And then they're also adding a bunch of security improvements, things like watermarking, screen capture protection, and tamper protection. This is great for companies where they are dealing with sensitive data, perhaps trade secrets, who knows, in cloud PCs, and to stop employees from leaking information by taking screenshots of stuff. There's now watermark implementation and screen capture sort of disabling abilities as well, which is kind of cool. There's also Windows 365 custom managed keys, which will allow organizations to encrypt their Windows 365 Cloud PC disks utilizing their own encryption keys. And there's also something called the Windows 365 Customer Lockbox, which will ensure that Microsoft support engineers can't access content to do service operations without explicit approval. So, of course, Cloud PCs being cloud-based, the actual Windows install is on Microsoft servers. And if there's a problem with your Cloud PC or if there's a problem with the server rack itself, obviously, Microsoft support engineers will need to go in and handle that stuff manually in person, and so enterprises may not be too comfortable with that. So now there's an explicit thing that enterprises will be like, hey, you can or cannot touch this. So if there's a problem, you need the permission from us to fix it first. So that's kind of cool. So those are the sort of highlights from the Microsoft Ignite 2023 conference. As I said, there's many more announcements you can check out online. Lots of breakout sessions and stuff. I believe there was a sort of not Windows one, but there was an AI centric Microsoft 365 centric one, which I think had some Windows stuff in it. Nothing new or really groundbreaking, but if you're interested in it, you can go and check it out. But yes, that is another year of Microsoft Ignite done and dusted. Hopefully next year they invite us back. It's been it's been a few years since Microsoft invited press to Ignite. The last one I think was 2019, and then obviously the pandemic happened, and ever since then they've just not invited us back. Maybe they didn't like us. Maybe they didn't ever want us there, and they were just doing it.
I mean,
to be nice.
I know like Paul Thurrott and stuff was there, but I'm fine not going.
I think Paul was there as a developer, not as press. I think.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's fine. We could do this. I know you like going
I
because
like
you
going.
can
Yeah.
meet and talk to people. Yeah, yeah.
I know you
But
don't like
I was
talking to
fine.
people, so I understand why you're not
No,
bothered.
that's true. I like talking to individual people. I don't like groups of people. I find it,
Yeah,
and
but
it's not that I
Ignite's
don't
one
like
big
the groups
group
of
of
people.
people.
Yeah, but I talk to individual
No, I know.
people, do one-on-ones, stuff like that. And what I mean by I don't like groups of people is not that I actually don't like them. It's just that I get mentally fatigued very quickly because that's what an introvert, that's our issue. So I just get mentally really exhausted. And then I'm like, I gotta go to my hotel room, close the door, and be in quiet just by myself for a while.
Yeah,
That's it. So
yeah,
it's
that's
not a
fair.
personal thing.
Yeah. All right. Last topic. We'll sort of rush through this, I guess. OnePlus this week announced their new Oxygen OS 14 release based on Android 14. The reason we're mentioning it here is because alongside the announcement, they also announced that they're building in phone link integration, just like Samsung, just like a couple of other OEMs at this point have been doing. OnePlus is the latest phone maker to implement phone link natively in their operating system, and that does a few things. It enables one or two additional features, things like screen mirroring or the apps sort of tab in the phone link app on Windows. And it also, I think, to be honest, it makes the connection between the phone and the PC more reliable because it becomes an OS service versus just a third-party app, which, especially on Android phones and Chinese phones in general, those OSs will kill that service quickly when it's in the background because they see it as a battery drainer. Now that shouldn't be a problem on OnePlus phones going forward, and I assume by extension Oppo phones because they technically run the same OS. That's a big win for Microsoft. They're big. That's a big phone maker in China and that sort of area. And so Samsung, I mean, that hasn't been the case for a while, but Samsung isn't the only big phone maker now that has phone link integration by default. OnePlus is joining the gang, and that includes things like the OnePlus 11 and the new OnePlus Open, which we were sort of mentioning at the beginning of the show. I've been using the OnePlus 11 for a while now. I really do like it. I'm not a huge fan of Oxygen OS. I don't really like how it looks. I think it's very I don't know. There's something about it that I'm just not a huge fan of. I just don't like any Android. I think I just miss Windows Phone. I just want to go back to Windows Phone. But Dan, you've been saying that you're kind of curious about it. Well, what's intriguing? What's making you want to buy one?
Well, just because I mean, it's got that wider aspect ratio, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
that's kind of what everybody says about this phone is when it's closed and using the primary the outside
phone.
screen,
Yeah.
it feels like a normal phone.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't quite get that on the Fold, obviously. That said, the Samsung. One thing I do like, but I've said before, Samsung said because you can use this form factor one-handed, and it's true. I use this thing one-handed all the time. I actually kind of really like that. So there's that, but I wouldn't mind trying it. It is substantially lighter. It's weird. It's not like if you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem huge, but I can tell you this is the kind of phone where when you put it in your hand, it feels lighter than it should. It's like, wait, it's like one of those, is this a dummy unit kind of thing? And it's just because up to this point, foldables have been pretty heavy because they often use a lot of metal. In fact, the Pixel Fold was really heavy, at least compared to some of the other ones out there. So I like having it lighter. I don't mind, I used to complain about the Fold 4 with its design where it had the gap and it felt like a gold brick in my pocket. The 5 though did get lighter, and it was light enough. It was enough that it made it light enough for me where I was just like, okay, now it feels okay, plus because it closes completely now, it takes up less space in my pocket. So I like, like I said, a lot of the stuff in the Fold 5 I really, really like. But you have that aspect, and then it's the cameras. The Fold's cameras are just, it's literally you're a couple years back of where we are. And I had the S23 Ultra, which was great. I had the Pixel 7, which was amazing. And so from everything I've read is that the OnePlus cameras are either kind of dead even or slightly better than Samsung's, So I need to actually go look that up a little bit on the internet, what reviews have said, because I know people have done deep dives. So that's one thing I do wish the cameras were better on this. Not that the OnePlus camera is going to be the Pixel level cameras. That's another reason to get the Pixel Fold is because those are the really good cameras.
Have you not considered the Pixel Fold? For Black Friday, it's $400 off, I think.
So my issue with it was the trade-ins were poor, and the discount stuff. Now, if I can do $400 off plus a trade-in, and they give me some good money for the trade-in, maybe, but they weren't giving me good money for my trade-in. Like it
What
was one of
price would you
those.
be okay with paying for a Pixel Fold?
Well, when I did it for the One Plus with their discount, when I first looked at it, I think I would have paid $700
Oh wow, that's
for
pretty
it.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were going to give for the S23 Ultra, they were going to give like 700 or 750 plus then they had $200 off or something like that. So it was like it stacked and it was a pretty big discount. It was still like $700 for a phone I technically don't need, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so if the Pixel did that, then maybe. But yeah, and then I don't use it often, but I still like the fact that I can use a pen on the Fold, the Samsung.
The OnePlus Open supports pen, believe it or not. They don't
I
advertise it as a feature,
oh
but the Oppo Find N3, which is the same phone, the same hardware, just branded Oppo, supports pen, and they have an Oppo branded pen which supports the Find 3. And so people were like, surely this just works on the OnePlus, and it does. People imported the Oppo Find N3 pen and tried it on the OnePlus Open, and it works. And not only does it works on both screens, the inside and the outside screen.
wow,
It's insane.
that's fascinating.
So if you're a Surface Duo user, the OnePlus Open is a very lucrative phone now, because not only does it do the pen stuff that the Duo did, but it also now has all the same phone link integrations that the Surface Duo did. And I think it even one-ups the Duo in regards to multitasking. Oxygen OS's multitasking on the OnePlus Open is the best implementation of multitasking I've ever seen. It uses this thing called Open Canvas, where obviously you can have two apps running side by side, but you can add a third app to it. And instead of doing what Samsung does, where it's like it squishes everything onto the tiny aspect ratio, tiny screen, it treats the screen as just like a viewing hole into a larger canvas, and so you can sort of just scroll around in this virtual canvas and just move to the apps you want. It's awesome, and you can even pinch out and see all of them running at the same time, so you can have 3 full-sized apps on this screen that can only naturally really fit 2. It works really, really well, and you can even make them larger, so you can make them tablet size, and you can scroll between them and stuff. It's great. I think it beats the Surface Duo's multitasking, I think. Yeah.
Wow, hold on. They're now taking the Z Fold 5 for a trade-in,
Oh, how much?
and they're offering $1,030 for it.
Is that you got the Fold 5, right?
I do.
Oh, wait. So
And
you'd
it
only
has
pay like 400, 500, no, $600 for it,
hold on. Let's see.
because it's on. I think it's on Black Friday sale now, so you might even get it more off. It might be like $400.
Hold on.
That's
I
a
gotta enter the.
that's a
Yeah, it's $650 plus a $350 trade-in bonus. Yeah, so it's $1,000 off. So yeah, I think I'd pay $500.
that's not bad. That's really not bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Are they taking Surface Duos for trade-in?
Samsung's like, no, don't do it.
Yeah. I wonder if have they got Surface Duo on the list for trade-in? I'd be shocked if they do. We'll give you $0 for that.
It's Google, LG, Moto, Apple, OnePlus.
That's a shame. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a crying shame.
But
well.
yeah, and I can get the black one with the faux leather on the back.
Yeah, I wish I got that one, because in the UK they only
Yeah.
have the green one, which is like whatever. But I want the black one. Looks nice.
Maybe I'll do this. I don't know. I like the Fold 5, but we'll see. Yeah, someone mentioned that it has no Qi wireless charging.
That's right.
Yeah, and
that's
that's
the only
true.
bummer. Yeah, that is the only bummer.
Yeah, but obviously they did that to make it thinner, which they did. They succeeded there, and they did it to make it lighter, which again they did and succeeded there.
Yeah.
So I get the design choice. I will also say I know people vary on this. I'm not a huge Qi user. That said, I would always rather have a phone with it than not, because obviously there are moments where it's cool to have. But I plug my phone in.
I'm a big wireless charging user. That said, on the OnePlus Open, it's not that big of a deal because it has the super fast charging. So I know even if I don't put my phone on charge at night, I'll wake up in the morning and might have 10% left. I only have to plug it in for 10 minutes and I've got a whole day of battery left to go. So like it's really not a big deal for the OnePlus Open. It's just annoying that you have to manually plug it in, because you're right, but when I was using the Pixel Fold stuff, I just have a bedside wireless charger. I just throw it on there every night and it was charged in the morning.
I still kind of hate with wireless chargers where you have to put it on and then you have to like wait for that light to come on to make sure.
Yeah.
Because
It would take a
is
second.
there anything more insulting or worse than when you get up in the morning and you
And it
grab your
hasn't done
phone
it.
and it was
Yeah.
just off by like a couple of millimeters?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh man,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was, so that's the only thing I still don't like. Although you can buy like really expensive cheap chargers, and they solve that just by putting
Multiple
like I saw,
coils. Yeah.
yeah, Tesla made one, believe it
Uh-huh.
or not. It had just like 30 coils in it, so that like the whole surface, it was a big surface too. You could put multiple phones, but wherever you put the device, it would charge.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was super expensive to do. I think it was like $200-300 for the charger.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
but anywho, cool. Well, maybe I'll do this. $500? I don't know. One thing they probably do, I assume, is that you get the phone and then you have like 15 days or whatever to
Yeah, there's
send
a
them to
return period. I
replace it.
think even since it's
Yeah.
now, you probably have an extended return period. You have to look on their website because usually the holidays they're like, hey, you can return it until January the 31st or something. So yeah,
Yeah.
check it out.
And how's the battery life been for you?
Good. It's very good. It's better than the Pixel Fold for sure. I don't know what Samsung's Fold 5 battery life reviews were like,
It's
but
good.
the
Yeah.
OnePlus Open is good. You'll get it for a day. No
I
problem.
I tell you, the Fold 5's battery life it's like the same for the S23 Ultra for me.
Really?
Like
Wow.
I
Yeah,
go to
yeah.
bed, yeah. Like if I'm below 50%, it's because I was out like doing photos all day and using
Yeah,
my
yeah.
phone like on like a business trip.
Yeah.
But for like regular daily use, I'm 70%, 60% by the time I go to bed at night. So
Yeah.
um, it's been really good. So what's like how much when you go to bed at night? What's your average?
I'd say I'm hitting 6, maybe even 7 if it's a light day for me.
Well, I
Screen
mean like
does.
percentage of battery, like how much is it?
So if it's a medium use day, I could probably be around 30%, maybe 25%, which is more than enough.
Okay.
If it's a heavy day, I'll be
Yeah.
down to like 10%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine. Yeah, it's cool with that supercharger though. Yeah, that definitely makes a difference too.
Yeah, it really
Yeah,
does.
they don't have that on Samsung's. Like it
No.
has fast charge, but it's not like that.
You can literally plug in the OnePlus Open for 10 minutes and you can have basically a whole day worth of juice to go straight after that. So that's crazy.
Cool. Well, I think that about does it for the podcast. Believe it or not, we are at 1 hour and 30 minutes. Actually, we didn't go the full 2 hours. Thank you. So we'll do some Q&A with the audience, of course, right now. So if you guys have questions, fire them off into the comment section. We'll try to answer as best as we can. We do record this live every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel. You can follow me, of course, on Twitter at Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. The same address also for Threads. I'm active on both. And the same applies for Zach, who's at ZACBOWDE. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Nice.
Give me 1 sec. I think I gotta let the dog out.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat. We're going to hang around for a few minutes and do our best to answer them. OnePlus Open multitasking looks good, so good, but I'm a pen user. Well, as we just discussed, the OnePlus Open does support pen on all screens, and it does support pen pressure. Look it up. So if you type in OnePlus Open and type in Oppo Find N3 pen, you'll see all the information you need to know about it because it does. It technically the Oppo Find N3 supports pen, and the OnePlus Open is the Oppo Find N3 just rebranded, and so that's why it supports pen. Even in the software, like there's a dedicated pen menu and everything. So, or pen syncing menu. I don't know if there's like a Surface Duo style pen menu, but yeah. Zach, do you think Windows 12 will focus on improving the touch experience, especially in Edge? Hitting the fave icons is a pain in the backside. No, no. Under Panos Panay, there was certainly a potential that they were looking into a brand new tablet UX for Hudson Valley. But now that he's gone, I don't think that's on the priority list right now. I think the next version of Windows, the Hudson Valley release, is just going to there'll be quality of that stuff throughout, but the big blockbuster thing for the next release is AI, next gen AI stuff. Is a CoreOS type Windows 12 being risked from the new leadership? I was really hoping for it. No, I think CoreOS will still happen. I don't see why not. It's not like they're giving up on Windows as a platform. No, yeah, CoreOS I think will still happen at some point. I just don't think they're going to call it Windows 12. I just think, given what I know about how they're so averse to fragmenting the Windows user base further, I don't think Windows 12 makes sense unless they announce and ship Windows 12 as an update to Windows 11, as in like it just rolls out to everyone on Windows 11, as like iOS does. But I don't think they can do that. I think there's licensing prevents them from doing that, and also OEMs probably need to get involved with that as well. And I just don't think they will. So I think it's just easier for everyone if they just call it Windows 11 2024 update or whatever. Do you think a consumer core PC is scrapped? I don't think so, no. I think we're going to see core PC on end-user hardware at some point. So does Microsoft Does Microsoft have any plans to offer gaming-level cloud PCs? I don't know. Obviously, Game Cloud, is that what it's called? Cloud gaming, Xbox xCloud. That is Xbox games. I don't see why they couldn't extend that to PC games. I don't know if you'll be able to sort of subscribe to a PC in the cloud that plays games, but I think you'll be able to subscribe to a selection of PC games that Microsoft has in a catalog. That is
pretty sure that's I mean, that's how Nvidia does it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So no consistency UI improvements in Windows 12 now that Panos is gone. They won't even touch the modal windows. I don't know about that. I think, like I said, we'll still see some quality of life improvements here and there. It won't be as dramatic as what they were planning under Panos Panay. Like I said, you've seen the leaked render with the sort of status bar along the top and other stuff. That I don't think is happening entirely. I think we might see the search bar at the top of the screen, but things like the system tray, to my knowledge, are remaining firmly at the bottom of the screen. I think it will be more Windows 11 than something new in regards to UI. They may go ahead and sort of improve things like dark mode. I don't know. I'm not holding my breath, but I hope they do, because there are holes in Windows that still need to be fixed. And under Panos Panay, they were getting around to it. They had plans to fix all of that. But now that he's gone, obviously priorities change. And with the new Windows leadership team being all about web services and Copilot and AI and stuff, those things are less of a priority to the current leadership. So we'll have to wait and see. Are plans for Windows 365 consumer dead? Now Panos is gone. Not to my knowledge. I don't even think that was a Panos thing. I'm pretty sure that was a general Microsoft thing. Do we expect a Surface event in April? I don't know if it's April, but we are expecting new Surfaces in the spring. I would guess maybe May time. Did you see the recently leaked Windows NT 3.1 build? It's so early that it doesn't have a GUI fully working, and it still identifies as NT OS/2 in some places. I have not seen that. That's pretty cool. I'll have to check that out. Will Windows 12 ever have a new user interface? I don't think so. Again, under Panos Panay at one point, probably. They certainly were experimenting with it, but I think the new leadership team do not want to rock the boat too much. And so I think we're going to get something quite similar to what we have with Windows 11. There will be updates and improvements and things. Like the start menu, I think, is going to have a new sort of creator tab in it. And I think that same thing will be added to the file explorer and stuff. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get like that leaked render that they were sort of looking at under Panos Panay. Your thoughts on Microsoft Patch Tuesday turning 20, and does Microsoft even care about that milestone? I don't know why anybody would care about that milestone. Patch Tuesday is a good idea, I guess. There should always be a day in the month where everybody knows that there are security patches coming. There's nothing more to say on the matter, I don't think. Will it be more about AI stuff? If you're talking about Hudson Valley, yes. The big blockbuster additions with the next Windows update will be next-gen AI stuff, some of which will require new hardware to utilize, things like the Snapdragon X Elite. Others won't. They will sort of work on CPU/GPU basis. But the big AI thing that I'm hearing is coming in version next will be, to my knowledge, NPU required. And I will write about it at some point. I'm still working on the post. But yes, what I've heard in regards to what they're working on in regards to AI for Hudson Valley is impressive. It's going to change the way we search for things on Windows. It's going to change the way we use Windows in some cases. It's pretty exciting. So by use Windows, I mean find things on Windows, I guess is the best way to think. It's pretty cool. Zach, what would be the next attempt at making Windows leaner and lighter as an OS, removing old code like Dialer? Why does Dialer still exist? Why does Dialer still exist? Yeah, so yes, I mean there is, and they are working on another light version of Windows. It's called. Well, we've sort of seen them refer to it in those FTC documents. So there's a thing called Win3, which is essentially a level of like layers of Windows, and the high level you are, the more it has in it. Win3 is ideally it can be a light version of Windows, a leaner, lighter version of Windows with faster updates. It's state separated and all this other stuff. They are working on one, and I'm sure I'll write about it at some point, but not today or this year probably. Any news about any foldables that Microsoft being worked on next year? What about Surface Duo OS software update efforts? Has Microsoft commented on the lack of updates this year? There are no foldables at Microsoft being worked on for next year, to my knowledge. There's certainly no Surface Duo updates being worked on. I asked Microsoft earlier this year if they were planning to ship Android 13 or Android 14 for the Surface Duo, and they gave me a no comment, which tells me no. Because if they were, they'd say yes. Because why wouldn't they? I'll ask them again, because I asked them every few months. I'll ask them next week, and we'll see what they say. But I'm not holding my breath. I don't think we're going to see any foldables. I don't think we're going to see any phones, unfortunately. And I don't think we're going to see any foldable PCs, only because, to my knowledge, Microsoft actually isn't working on any foldable enhancements for Windows currently. Again, under Passman A, I think that was all on the table. But now that he's gone, I don't think that's something they're focused on currently. Were you finally able to run that leaked build of Andromeda OS on a Duo? No, the leaked. So the build of Andromeda. Wait. Unless what build of Andromeda OS are you talking about? If you're talking about the thing that I demoed, no, because that was an ARM32 build, and Surface Duo only runs ARM64. If there's been a new leaked Andromeda OS build, I've not seen it, and no, I have not tried to run it on a Duo. But if it is an ARM64 build, there is no reason why Gustav Montz on Twitter couldn't get it running on there. So you should ask him. Zach, are we going to get a true iPad 11-inch competitor from Microsoft next year in terms of performance? No, not next year. The 11-inch Surface Pro that they have been looking at working on or building is scheduled for the Surface Pro 11, to my knowledge, which won't be next year. That would be probably 2025 or 2026. And in regards to performance, no idea. It's too far out to know what the performance would be like.
So I just priced out. Yeah, if I get the OnePlus Open, Voyager Black, 512 storage. It'll be, well, I got to pay the tax. So, but the total will be $613.
That's not
with
bad.
The trade-in.
That is not bad.
Maybe.
Surely you've got some other phones lying around you can also sell.
I know, but they have to go sell them.
Yeah, it's true. I am also hoping for that Win3 and CoreOS Windows. There are lots of apps that need to be upgraded from Win32 to from 1990s to the modern UI. Yeah, I don't think that matters for Core OS specifically. The Neon compatibility layer should handle any old apps that won't be happy with things like state separation. Not that the UI has anything to do with that, but I mean, everything's Win32. Well, UWP's dead. There's no push to develop UWP apps for Microsoft anymore. If you're building a Windows app, it's either a Win32 app with a modern interface using WinUI or whatever it is these days, or you're building a web app. What's the Creator tab in Start? Well, one of the things I heard that they were working on, again, this is the Windows Web Experiences team. They're all about pushing services. One of the ideas was if you go to, I think it's. Hang on, what's the website called? this? Yeah, if you go to create.microsoft.com, there's this sort of landing page for all of Microsoft's creative services, and that includes Designer, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Forms, Clipchamp, and Loop. They basically want to put this in Windows, and so there'll be at least what the sort of idea I think they've looked at is that they want to have like where it says pinned on the start menu, there'll be next to that, it'll say create, and you click on that, and then it would just be like, hey, here's a bunch of different templates in Designer, or here's a letter or Word document you were working on recently, stuff like that. And that same landing page of the Create website will more or less, I think, be implemented into File Explorer, probably one for one. But that's the kind of thing they're looking at as sort of upsell for Microsoft services in Hudson Valley. I'm sure there'll be an AI implementation there.
One reason that's keeping me from doing this is just because, like, they can't get it to me till December 11th. I can be dead by then.
It'll be old news, yeah.
Like, hey, who knows where my head will be at in December 11th.
I might hate foldables by then.
Yeah, it's like, that's just too low. I need impulse buying, baby.
Yeah.
Give it to me in 3 days.
Right, exactly.
Oh, well.
Do you think that Microsoft's custom ARM CPU could be used in a future Xbox console, given the fact that it's using an architecture? Considering the fact that the console, they were considering using this architecture. Yeah, I don't think so though. I think if they do go for an ARM chip, it'll probably be. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so. I think they'd rather go with Nvidia or AMD's offerings of ARM. My Xbox has used AMD since Xbox 3. No, I think the Xbox 3 is PowerPC, isn't it? No, it can't be. Or was that the original Xbox? What was the Xbox 360 based on?
Me.
CPU. The X CPU named Xenon. Yeah, but what is it? Oh, it is PowerPC. I thought it was. Okay. Yeah, it's a custom triple-core 64-bit PowerPC based design. So the Xbox One was AMD, and they've stuck with AMD since. So who knows? Maybe that will continue with this ARM-based Xbox V Next console. Is Core PC going to be shipped next year? No idea. I think it would make sense for them to. I think it would make sense for them to ship the first Core PC laptops with the Snapdragon X Elite with Hudson Valley in the summer of next year. I just think it would make sense. But if it's not ready, or if they don't think it's ready, then of course that won't happen. And I don't know when they will deem it ready, because they've been working on this sort of stuff for like longer. When was Core OS first talked about? 2016, 2017? This is a continuation of that vision. They've been working on this for 100 years. It's like, come on, get on with it. Ship it.
Oh, man. Wait, why is that popping up? Weird. Never mind.
All right, a couple more questions, then it's time to head off, I think. Zach, is there a community in London where people gather to discuss Microsoft stuff over a pint or something? There used to be. There used to be these things we used to do called Windows Insider Meetups. They were handled by Michael Gillett on Twitter. But since the pandemic, they've not started up again, primarily because he now works for Microsoft, and so they'd technically be classed as official events, and I don't think he's allowed to do them anymore. But yeah, a long time ago there were. Not so much these days. Nobody wants to meet anymore because of COVID. Okay, I think with that, we can head off. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we shall see you next time. Bye-bye.